This is Gateway City Sports.
Just a real quick insert before we get the show started, because we missed the opportunity when recording, but we certainly don't want to miss the opportunity to wish our very own Elliott Dewey a happy birthday. Enjoy the week, buddy. Sorry we missed it during the show, and we'll see you all next week. Enjoy.
It's a trap!
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
This is the Team of Rivals podcast.
Everything you want to hear from the big sports to the big screen.
He's all by himself, fires into the end zone. Caught! Touchdown! No!
Vaughn into the windup in his first offering. Just a bit outside. He tried the corner and missed.
Doesn't like you. I don't like you either.
Time winding down. Michael for three. Yeah! Yes! She is gone! I don't believe what I just saw.
Go crazy, folks! Go crazy!
You believe in miracles? Yes!
You may fire when ready.
What?
Welcome, Cubs and Cardinals fans, to the Team of Rivals podcast, proud members of the Gateway City Sports Network, where you can find great podcasts and blog content. It's deadline day. We're not broadcasting on Thursday because the deadline just happened. So here you go, our hot takes on everything that happened and didn't happen today. You can follow us on social media, Team of Rivals Pod. You can find us online at teamofrivalspodcast.com. For those of you who prefer to watch the show, we also post to YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble. So hit the like and subscribe buttons and be sure that notifications are on so that you know anytime we post new content. Joining me, as always, co-founder of TOR number 104 in the 2021 edition of the Top Cards on Twitter, Ron Nuttall, and permanent occasional guest host, Elliott Dewey. Elliott, Ron, what was your favorite moment of the Juan Soto on the St. Louis Cardinals roster era?
I don't know if there was any favorite moment. I know what Elliott's response will be. That's the fact that he went to San Diego because he would enjoy watching me bitch about that. But as I said,
not
Thursday,
just you, Rod. All of St. Louis Cardinals Nation on Twitter.
No, Twitter's
themselves.
Twitter's bad enough, but I got us off of all those stupid ass Facebook groups that are awful, and I imagine they've just went nuclear stupid. They probably went completely submental, so I don't even want to check in on them. But I think that my feeling is absolutely 100% no different than it was Thursday. I didn't think it was going to happen, for one, so I did not set myself up for disappointment. A favorite moment of the day, you asked that. I want to answer that question. So there's nothing about the Soto moment really pops out as my favorite, other than, yes, chuckling a little bit at some of the explosions that happened out there on Twitter was kind of fun to watch. I don't know why people do this to themselves. They have not made a significant real impact deadline move since probably Matt Holliday. So that might be unfair. Maybe 2011 was a little impactful. They did win a World Series that year, but I didn't expect it. It didn't happen. We got some pitching, big names. I don't know, man. There was not really a favorite moment other than, okay, fuck. You know what my favorite moment is? Fuck this. Favorite moment is it's over. There you
go. Ron, you don't have your camera on, do you?
No.
I can tell because there was no smart-ass comment about my my tribute to Mo as we're recording here this evening.
No, I can see you.
Oh, okay, good.
I happen to be I'm watching the game right now, and it's on two things out in my garage, and I didn't want to put it in frame. So
no worries. E, how about you, buddy? What was your favorite moment of this year's trade deadline?
My favorite moment was the confusion of whether or not the Soto trade was going to happen, because Eric Hosmer said, I am putting in my no trade clause. So everybody was like, oh, fuck.
He didn't even have to put it in. Washington was on his team, was on his list of teams.
And you know what, Elliott, you were absolutely right. I totally forgot about that. If I could change my response, I'm not going to officially, but he did remind me. I did forget that detail. That was rather humorous. Like, wait a minute, is this a dead deal? Because he could just say no because they're already on his no trade list. And so it is. That was entertaining, the confusion. And you have credible, like 4 or 5 credible Twitter followers.
Yeah.
We probably all follow.
Hassan, Rosenthal.
all giving a different version of this.
Yes.
So, yeah, it was good. That was actually gold. I want to, at some point in time, we should probably just make a collage of all those tweets when they happen together because it was rather funny.
Yeah, I got to tell you guys, I really did. EM with you. Man, I loved watching the Cardinals Twitter meltdown in slow motion as it started to become obvious that this was not going to happen.
Like 10 full minutes of like meltdown and just refresh on my Twitter feed.
And Ron, I mean, honestly, look, I think that the reality is somewhere in between, right? This wasn't a terrible trade deadline for you. Once again, Mozeliak addressed what you guys needed to, but he certainly didn't hit it out of the park. But I love all the Cardinals fans who were so all in on Soto being traded to St. Louis that when the word came out that basically you got Quintana and Gumby, they were all like, "What? That's it? I'm outraged." I'm so happy. So happy.
Oh, yeah. There was the outrage last year. I don't, and believe it or not, I know the disappointment's huge for some fans that we didn't get the big star. I do think last year was worse with Happ and Lester. I think the meltdown on Twitter, if I could go back and look, which I'm not going to waste my time doing, but if I remember correctly, the outrage over acquiring those two guys was pretty fierce. I mean,
no, you're absolutely right.
Like, this is there are quotes like, and a guy I follow, but I've had to mute him for a while. She's just become too much. But like stating, this is the worst possible thing the Cardinals could have done. And I'm just like sitting there going, holy shit, man, how can you even say that? It's stitched together, you know, and we're on our knees begging for pitchers to come back off of injury and the team to start playing better. How could bringing in a couple veterans be the worst possible thing they could have done? No, the worst possible thing they could have done was to do nothing last year. And I'd say the same thing this year. I'm not on a scale of, 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. I want to get more finite with this. What's my satisfaction with this trade deadline? And I would probably put it at about a 6. It's not terrible. It's middle of the road. We'll see how these guys do, but you know what? Like, everybody hated it last year, but I think Happ and Lester really came through. I'm not saying Lester was his 2015, 2014 form, but he was a very solid pitcher for them over the last couple of months, and Happ did a pretty good job too. So, these guys could do the same or worse. And so we'll see how that all pans out. But I'm at about a 6. It's pretty much what I expected. If you go back and replay what I said the other night, you'll probably hear the same thing.
And Ron, I think that's a great point. If anything, I think if you look at it from that standpoint, I think the Cardinals did do worse this year at the deadline than last year, because at least you were getting guys who had a much more proven record than the Cardinals picked up this year. Lester way more accomplished than Quintana.
I think
Happ way more impressive a resume than I can't even remember his last name. I just know that he's Gumby. His nickname's Gumby.
Hey, Elliott, turn around. Okay. He did. Oh, are you behind me? Sorry, I didn't mean to spoil it for you. Spoiler alert.
No, it's okay. Spoiler alert. Carlson's
everybody who was here's a funny, ironic thing. Everybody who's enraged that Dylan Carlson was the way it was phrased by a lot of media on Twitter was, the holdup was the Cardinals weren't willing to deal him, and he just homered. Not that fixes everything, but let me pause on that for a second. Let me finish what I was saying about the pitching. If you look at immediate stats, Pete, most near stats to right now, to where we were last year. You could probably argue the Cardinals did better this year, as far as like most immediate performance of the pitchers they acquired. But I agree that when you bring in veterans like that have a proven track record, sometimes when they switch teams and they go somewhere where, hey, the team's in the hunt, they get a little bit of a shot in the arm, a little bit of adrenaline, and they have one more run, right? And that's what you're hoping to catch sometimes when you get guys like Happ and Lester like they did last year. And it worked. And I kind of thought that might happen. We saw Will Clark's last run in St. Louis in 2000 when they got him right at the end of his career for the last couple of months. And he gave him what he had. He gave him that last burst of baseball that he had left in him. And that can happen sometimes when you're getting these guys late. All of a sudden they go from a sub 500 team to all of a sudden to a team that's in contention, and there's a little bit more electricity in the stadium, and good things can happen. So with these guys here, while, obviously don't have neither one of them have the history that John Lester did. Quintana was having a pretty nice year. And I would say that Montgomery from the Yankees, I say for being in the AL East and having the record he does right now in the ERA, that's nothing to I don't think that's anything to thumb your nose at. So
I'd just caution you. I mean, I know that, look, what was it? 5 years ago, we did an emergency podcast because the Cubs had traded for Quintana. Yeah, you're right.
I stood up doing that one too.
Quintana
and emergency setup.
Right.
Elliott, don't turn around in 30 seconds.
Shit.
And Ron also, and you even, I mean, look, you basically accepted the point last night when you said we're not doing an emergency broadcast because of Quintana.
Right.
Look, we saw it over 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Jose Quintana is not going to be the difference. He's not. In fact,
great.
this would be.
He's put a nice year together.
He has
he's also
in
been
Pittsburgh,
on the Pittsburgh Pirates,
right? And that was
low pressure.
That's the point I was about to make. He had a nice start to his career playing for the White Sox. I mean, you can't get much low pressure than that, than playing for the second team in a major media market and a team that wasn't expected to do much when he was putting together a career. So then you put him under the microscope in Chicago for the Cubs, and he basically had one half of a good season when he came over in 2017, and then he really didn't do anything. So for the Cardinals fans who are listening to this, I wouldn't get too excited about him. You're going to end up being disappointed.
I think what they needed though, Pete, is innings eaters.
Yeah,
I mean,
I get it.
If you can get these guys are probably a 4 or 5 in most rotations, right? So Pittsburgh doesn't count. I don't care if Quintana was their ace or not, or 1 or 2 starter, but here he's going to be 4 or 5. But they needed depth. That's really just what they needed was depth. And point taken. How you described Quintana is like jumping out of a pool on a cold day. A little bit of shrinkage goes there when you go to a big market, right? When you go to when expectations are cranked up. So
hello, Joey Gallo.
Yeah, right. I feel.
I can't believe they were able to get rid of him for a prospect.
Yeah. Well, that gets around to the most disappointing moment of the day. And we'll get to you guys, but I get to go first. Most disappointing of the moment of the day came at the very end of the day when Harrison Bader joined Jordan Bader in New York. That means that Bader never gets to face Bader. I was so looking forward to the Bader matchup, and it's never going to happen, or at least it's not going to happen for a while.
Right.
So disappointed.
Sorry. You know what? Every middle-aged Cougar woman in Cardinals Nation is weeping tonight. I mean, they are devastated. That was the worst. That wasn't just your worst moment of the trade deadline. That was every Cougar, like I'd say 30 to 40 plus year old female in Cardinals Nation, just devastated that Harrison Bader's no longer with the team.
Yeah, who are all the Cardinals Cougars going to get wet over? Bader's gone. O'Neill's injured again.
I don't. That's a good question. Either O'Neill's going to have so much focus on his muscles that he's going to collapse, or I don't know. That's a good question. Look, I don't wish this guy any ill will at all. He's probably a fun guy to have around. He's got a lot of energy and he's got a lot of showmanship. I just wish his play would have equaled his showmanship. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, look, the antics on the base pass when he got a double or something like that. He's always got an expression or something to show, and he's got the locks and the helmet flies off. Look, man, I've really changed as I've gotten a little bit older about that kind of stuff. I don't mind a little bit of personality leaking through into the game. I think the rub with him was, I wish you played as good as you carried yourself, right? Because like that body language, that demeanor just didn't reflect his performance. Now, defensively, you can't argue that, right? He's a great defender in center field. He's going to help anybody, and he's as good as anybody there is in the outfield. He's got tremendous speed. He's got a good glove. He's got a pretty decent arm. It just offensively, he just didn't provide very much. He was very inconsistent. He had I'd say a decent year last year. The scary thing about him, if I was a Yankees fan, is he's got a condition called plantar fasciitis, which Albert Pujols plagued him for back half of his career as a Cardinal, and obviously impacted him throughout his tenure with the Angels, and he still deals with it today. So for a speedster like Bader, that's kind of that's a very big watch out, and that's why there was a clause in that trade that if he can't play in this year's postseason, that player to be named later will be activated, and they'll have to give them another probably minor league or some kind of low level prospect, but that'll kick in. So the Yankees are obviously aware of that, right? So they're willing to take that risk. They had one more year of control on him. I don't really think they would have brought him back. He could do enough to where he's valuable on most clubs. Like, he's going to have a long future in Major League Baseball because he can do many things, right? He can, if you want to bring a late game, pinch runner in or defensive replacement, if his bat just completely crumbles, he still brings back. He can still bring.
I mean, he's a Gold Glove outfielder. I mean, that's exactly why the Yankees brought him over there.
Yeah, and it should play pretty well there in Yankee Stadium. I would guess so. I was a little surprised that they got rid of him now, especially when he's out on the IL. But, the Yankees got a good defensive center fielder. We'll see if they can pull the Matt Carpenter magic on him with the bat.
Well, and you know what? Given their lineup, they don't need him to hit.
Exactly, and that's the type of lineup, Pete. Good point. That I think players like him and Matt Carpenter were probably meant to be in, where they didn't have to be counted on to be a leadoff hitter or a centerpiece or a core player. They were a role player, and you hear that all the time. What the hell does that mean? It means we don't count. We need the other things you bring to the game. We don't necessarily need your bat at the plate. We need you to do well enough to where you don't create a black hole in the lineup. But we need you on defense. When you do get on base, we love your speed on base. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it does. Much him and Matt Carpenter were role players, and when they can thrive in New York. And so best of luck to him. I wish him no ill will. But I think the Cardinals probably did eventually need to change direction from him anyway. They placed a bet that didn't work out. They've quickly traded away outfielders like Adolis Garcia and Randy Rosarina. They placed their bets down on O'Neill and Bader. And I don't think either have reached the level the Cardinals thought that they would make it to at this point. I think O'Neill's time in St. Louis is also very, very short. So,
you have too much talent.
I'm surprised to see the name come up.
You have too much talent down in the minors. Dylan Carlson is ready to take over in center field. It's time to move on. Taking that
stockpile, they used to have a stockpile logjam of outfielders. Now all of a sudden, it's
time to prove
at the level where it's starting to get a little thin. Like if the Cardinals made this deal for Soto and Carlson had to be a part of it with Bader on the IL, who the hell's playing center field at that point? Big question. Right. So was the slam dunk. Probably had a little bit to do with why nothing happened today.
So staying in the disappointed lane, Ron, what was your most disappointing moment of the last, let's say 48 hours? Because this definitely was the hold my beer trade deadline, right? Like the 2022 trade deadline looked at 2021 and said, hold my beer, because this was crazier than last year.
Yeah, last year was pretty nuts league wide, right? You look at everybody who moved around and in a short span of time. I don't think a lot of the guys, that cover this shit professionally, where heads were probably spinning with all the information that was flying at them, and everybody wants to get that tweet out first.
So what disappointed you today?
I'd have to say that I don't know if there's anything that jumps out that says, man, this is so disappointing, but maybe the most shocking thing was that Contreras and Happ, Jock Peterson are all still with their teams.
And Carlos Rodon.
Rodon too. Sorry. Yes. Thank you. I can pull a name out of the ether there, but yeah, absolutely him too. So there were some moves that were not made that, while disappointing because you're like, Jesus, I thought that one was pretty obvious and it didn't work out. So it makes me wonder what's going on in baseball, the marketplace.
And there were some catchers that moved around too under that skill point of Contreras too, which I thought was interesting that the teams would rather go with that. Maybe Jed was asking too much.
Or here we go. I'm going to throw this one out here that I haven't seen anywhere else. Maybe the rest of Major League Baseball doesn't think that Willson Contreras and Ian Happ are as good as Chicago Cubs fans think they are. Just putting that out there. Ian Happ has another year of control after this year, and people were motivated to go for and I mean, obviously Wilson's done at the end of the year, but teams were motivated to trade for catchers. Teams were motivated to trade for other outfielders. And as you said, Elliott, at lesser skill points. So maybe they don't buy Ian Happ's renaissance. They don't buy that Willson Contreras really is the best bat at the catcher position. Maybe they don't buy that what we as Cub fans have come to believe. And maybe we were wrong about these two players. Maybe.
Yeah, it could be. I think that most Cub fans have probably seen enough of Happ and Contreras it's a good point. I mean, we always favor our own guys, even when we're trying to be objective. We still have a little bit of bias there floating around towards our own players. So, but it is possible that the most value that those guys have is to their own clubs at this point, even in rebuild mode. So I don't know, man. We could spit out 6 or 7 theories here of why guys like that ultimately weren't moved. I know Happ's got control, so there's always time down the road where they could make a move with him off season or next year, but you'd have to think.
Typically, the second half of his season is when he shines too, and the fact that he put it together.
Right. And if that shows on analytics, you'd have to think that, boy, the Cubs should have cashed in on him now and didn't, but.
Or maybe
I didn't want to see him in St. Louis anymore. The most disappointing thing for me today is that the son of a bitch is in St. Louis, and I didn't want to see him there again. I know that's post deadline, so it doesn't really count, but he robbed a home run tonight too. So he's just
barely
an annoying player for me.
Barely. Let's not chalk him up as the second coming of Harrison Bader. He barely kept that one in.
The Cubs always have one or two of those guys, though. They have like a Hendricks who he throws like pixie dust up there. Like they just can't figure his 82 mile an hour heat out. And Happ for some reason comes up, and I feel like he's Ken Griffey Jr.
Oh God, no!
Every time I feel like he is against us. So,
Elliott, what disappointed you today? What were you looking forward to seeing?
I mean, as much as I like Happ and Contreras, I was almost hoping that they would get traded for some young prospects. I was hoping we could fleece the Mets again for another PCA. And unfortunately, I don't think the Mets going to want to deal with the Cubs again for a while, especially after trading Hobby for 2 months, and look what that got him.
Now that you mention it, Elliott, that makes me think about something. This could very well be one of the side effects of improving your system so rapidly. You're unwilling to take a player if he's not going to be better than somebody that you're going to have to get rid of somehow, right? So if you bring in a Mark Vientos, but you've already calculated that he's not going to bring the same level of value as, let's say, Owen Casey, well, then what good are you doing your organization? Because now Casey is blocked. And we're seeing that with the Cubs. There's a logjam at outfield, and guys who probably should be getting promotions aren't getting promoted right now because there's nowhere for them. There aren't the at-bats for them at the next level. And that could very well be what held things up today. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the market did value Happ and Contreras, but didn't value them enough to make it worth it for the Cubs to have to make a tough decision on one of their minor leaguers then, because they're much deeper now than they were 12 months ago.
Well, I think that's why you saw Robertson, Efros, and Givens all traded, because there are arms in the system now that are good, that can be called up to take the place. And maybe they're not as effective right away, but they're projected to be good. Maybe next year, maybe this is the time that they're going to get them, that look here with the MLB for the next couple months, and then build on that for next year.
And it strikes me that it's a lot easier to get pitchers innings than it is to get hitters at bats.
Right.
Even though you've got 10 guys in a game or 9 guys in a game who are going to be hitting, that's spread out over what, in an average game, 36 at bats, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in a standard game, you're talking about 9 innings of work. You're not allowing most starters to go past 5 innings anyway.
You're right.
So you're probably looking at least 5 pitchers every game. There's plenty of work to go around in the minor leagues for a pitcher. And that's like strongly where the Cubs have leaned this year, is into their pitching, whether it's through trades, the draft, whatever. They're going heavy into pitching.
Right.
We
saw that at the draft.
No,
too.
Go ahead, Ron.
I mean,
not to derail the conversation, but I was thinking about this the other day because I saw Jack Morris or Frank Viola, one of those type of guys right from the 80s, had tweeted out, I think it was Viola, 25 years ago today or 30 years ago today, I became a New York Met, and I think it was 25 years ago, and I'm just looking at guys like him and Jack Morris, and I'm not going all the way back to the Gibson days or anything, but I'm just looking at these guys going, like Nolan Ryan, how many complete games these guys threw and how many strikeouts they had, how many complete games they had. And it is just crazy these days that we think it's a huge accomplishment for a starter to get past 5 innings. And I'm just remembering players that we grew up with, Pete, that was like place, right? It was like you had a disastrous night if you were taken out before 5 innings. These guys would pitch through everything. And I'm just wondering how many of those guys would have had things like Tommy John surgery or major setbacks, or went down on the DL for extended periods of time, been on throwing programs also. It just makes me wonder, like, if the technology or the medical staffs existed then as they do now, would we have been looking at, would we have grown up with the same thing? Likely. But I don't know. It really is like such a shift in what we were used to, seeing pitchers just pitch through things, aches, pains, and I'm sure the guys do now, right? Like throwing a baseball as hard as these guys do. I'm sure it's taxing on the shoulder and the forearms and the elbows, but it really is amazing when you look at characters like Jack Morris that just, those guys pitch through injuries that would probably put guys on the IL for 60 days these days.
Well, and also it strikes me, and we've talked about this before, that the focus in pitching, and I don't know if it's because of a radar gun, but the focus in pitching has changed. I guarantee you that when Jack Morris and Frank Viola were up there on the mound in their careers, they were not throwing 100% on every single pitch to every single batter. You approached Ozzie Smith differently than you approached Jack Clark. You probably felt like you didn't have to throw 100% to get one past Ozzie. Now, Ozzie was smarter than you, and he was gonna take what you gave him. But look, if you're going out and you're throwing everything on every pitch, you're gonna break down. Whereas if you know that the expectation is that if you don't go 7 innings, you're letting your team down, then you're gonna find those opportunities where you don't have to go full gas on every pitch so that you can make it to the 7th inning.
Yeah, and I just wonder, like, optically, if you don't know any better, you look at it, you think everybody's trying to do that, right? They're trying to throw their soul into every pitch and give it everything. But I guess the guys that do it the longest, guys like Greg Maddux, were really mastering that ability just to throw off timing and have that pinpoint location. Not everybody can be a Greg Maddux. Might be an extreme example of somebody who probably could have pitched forever, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And think about the long term. Think about the long-term effect of that too. it wasn't that long ago where if a team was carrying 11 or, my God, 12 pitchers on their roster, that was insane.
Especially in the National League.
Yeah. Wait a minute. You're going to cut your bench down to only, to only 4 or 5 guys on your bench? Are you serious? You're only going to have 5 guys on your bench? Are you nuts? And now it's 3. Now they're down to 3 guys on their bench.
And they've had to expand rosters, right? To carry an additional arm because these guys, because they throw their life force into every pitch and they run out after 3 years, these middle relievers do. That's why you see them go in and out of this game so often. No, I didn't mean to segue into that. It struck me as funny because I did see Frank Viola post that on Twitter. I'm like, oh yeah, he's a crafty lefty and he was around for quite a while. And
look at guys like John Lester, who his goal every single season was to throw 200 innings.
Yeah.
That was his goal. It wasn't about wins and losses. It was giving his team 200 innings.
And 200 innings was baseline when we were growing up.
I know.
If you didn't throw 200 innings, you didn't have a job.
And the guys like Fergie Jenkins and Bob Gibson were like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm going to throw 300.
Right.
Minimum.
I don't care if everything's falling apart.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Anyway, interesting observation I've had this week. It was just, when we were talking about pitching, that's what came up. And so it just seems so fragile, and fragile is not the right term, but that's what it appears like. But you see how hard everything the guys are putting into every pitch, and it's no wonder.
Yeah. I mean, think about the years that Fergie Jenkins was up for Cy Young, and he's 20 complete games in a season.
It's like that's shit.
Like now it's like if a guy gets 2 complete games in a season, he had a good season. He threw 20 in a season.
Yeah, I like the quality start thing too. I wonder what somebody like a Bob Gibson would have thought about this quality start qualification.
You pussies.
Oh, the good old days that we weren't around for.
Yeah.
All right, so let's
around for some of it.
So let's talk the big elephant in the room. Were you guys surprised that the Padres actually pulled this off? Because I'll tell you, when I went to bed last night, I thought that this thing wasn't happening.
I did not think it was going to happen either. I figured that whatever the Nationals were going to ask for was going to be just way too much for a 23-year-old.
Well, evidently the Cardinals knew last night that they were out of it, right? So it kind of lingered on today without.
But not only did they get Juan Soto, they got Josh Bell too.
Yeah.
And they got Josh Hader a day before that, right?
And they were able to get rid of Luke Voigt and Eric Hosmer.
Eric Hosmer. That being that guy right now,
I
think I texted you guys earlier today. I'm like, it's just, regardless, he's going to Boston. Maybe he's always wanted to play there or whatever, but they're assembling a team to win in San Diego, and it's very clear that they don't think you're a part of it. And that's a shitty feeling. It has to be for him.
Not only are you not a part of it, but you're seen as actively impeding their ability to win a World Series. Like we are so desperate to win this World Series, we will send you anywhere.
To any of the other 19 teams on your list. Yeah. I wonder if St. Louis or Chicago were on his no trade list.
Chicago was not. We know that. Chicago.
I'm wondering if St. Louis was, because it's Midwest, and obviously he went to the.
I saw a lot of chatter online about people being excited that maybe Chicago would go after him. I'm just like,
well, because apparently they had those conversations before. It had nothing to do with Hosmer. It had to do with the idea that a really good prospect or two would be attached in order to eat his entire salary.
What was he owed? Like $30 million or something?
I think it's $39 million over the next 3 years.
I was curious that he was included in that. And it was the initial mentions of this were, Soto to San Diego. Now, let me address that, Pete. That's what you asked. You said you were surprised that San Diego pulled this off. And I am too at the end of the day, because the Nationals didn't have to do this right now. They've got 2 more years of control on Soto. So somebody had to come up really big time, right, and give them what they thought was worth, giving up 2 years of control on one of the better players in the game, one of the more exciting players in the game. So that part of it, and I marry it with the fact that San Diego's been all in the last couple of years. We've obviously seen that. They have made big time moves. They have tried to assemble something to, not just catch lightning in a bottle, but catch some certainty of lightning in a bottle, right? That you've got players that can change a game, and now you're assembling a bunch of them. So I'm not overly shocked that they or the Dodgers were able to pull this off. But super shocked that other names like Josh Bell were thrown into it, and all of a sudden Eric Hosmer's name was mentioned like 3 tweets later, and you're like, wait a minute. And then the confusion happened, which, Elliott, you're right. You reminded me of it, and I failed in the beginning. That had to be my favorite part of the day, was the mass confusion of all the people we follow who we believe. And I believe them. I believe it was probably terribly confusing. And these guys were pissed because a lot of them had to not retract, but they had to post corrections.
Well, and they had to correct their corrections, right? Because it went from this deal is happening to, this deal's on hold to, no, this deal is happening regardless. It's just now they got to figure out what they're going to do with Hosmer.
I think the guy who had it the most right, that guy who had it the most right from the beginning was John Heyman, which I don't like that guy very much. He seems like an ass, but he had it right, I think, from the beginning. So that he said, nope, this deal is done regardless of what Hosmer does. Padres will just have to figure out what to do with him. So there you have it.
My second favorite one was, what was it? Bader's traded, but we don't know where.
That is a good one.
That one, and that happened to Tommy Pham yesterday too. Tommy Pham was traded.
Oh, we haven't even broached that subject yet.
We didn't even know where. And then
Tommy Pham's "I'm pissed off that somebody tour" continues. Next stop,
Yes.
Boston.
Oh my God, Tommy Pham. Who's more unpleasant in the locker room tomorrow? Tommy Pham or Eric Hosmer? Who is more pissed off? Because you've just joined a team.
Start a fantasy football.
You've just joined a team that basically said, we're just outside of the wild card. We could make it, but fuck it. We're giving up on this year. Oh, but Tommy, Eric, come on in. The water's fine.
The water's great.
You just got traded to a team that has completely given up. And speaking of teams that have given up, I mean, it's not outside of the realm of possibility that you guys can catch the Brewers, because I cannot imagine that the morale in the Brewers locker room right now, or clubhouse, whatever you want to call it, is very, very happy. After, I don't see how the moves that they made have significantly improved that team. I understand why they made them in order to extend their competitiveness, but I don't know that it's significantly improved this year's team. Devin Williams did not look happy when they talked to him today about Hader getting traded. He was pissed.
He's the most effective closer in the game of baseball for the most part. And your team's making a run and you get rid of him, nobody's got to be happy.
And the one person who should be happy after that move is Williams, and he wasn't, right? No. This is going to burnish his resume, and this is going to ultimately make him money. And he's not happy about it.
It's just not going to make the Brewers as effective at the end of games.
That's right.
When you've got both of them and you can alternate or throw Hader a couple nights and then him, but then if you throw him a couple of nights, who do you go to next?
You have to give credit. It'll be interesting to see where the NL Central is in a couple of years, because the Pirates and the Reds certainly did well at this deadline. But given their past ability to screw things up, I don't think that we have too much to worry about, because they're going to mess it up somehow, right?
Absolutely. They figure out a way.
Yes. Life finds a way, and so do the Reds and the Pirates. All right.
You gotta open up the shirt when you say something like that there, Pete.
That's right. I know. I gotta undo the bow tie and open up the shirt so I can say, life finds a way. Well, Ron, I know we got to get going for you. So final thoughts, gentlemen, on the 2022 trade deadline. Probably a little less than what we were expecting, but anything that we didn't cover that you guys wanted to throw in your 2 cents on?
So Cubs not trading Willson Contreras means that a couple of things are going to happen. Either they extend him and they rock with him for the next few, 4-5 years, whatever they're going to offer him. Qualifying offer, which is going to ruin his free agency and the amount of money that he's probably going to get, because then he has a qualifying pick attached to him. So it's going to be interesting to see where Jed takes this. If he's going to try and extend him now, after the season, do the qualifying offer, which won't net him as much money. It's kind of shitty that that's the way it happens, because there's no international draft after the season, right? For next season, no international draft. That's why they have those qualifying.
Correct. They couldn't come to an agreement.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's going to suck.
Well,
That was my only thoughts.
But,
yeah, it'll suck for him. So
yeah,
hopefully they do right by him.
And I don't know, like sweeping around the league in my brain, I don't know who's necessarily looking for catching help. There's probably 3 or 4 teams that could offer him something. With the situation changing like that, I don't.
Yeah.
I feel like he's going to be forced to go somewhere he probably wouldn't have picked up front, right? That's kind of what I'm guessing. Anybody's going to take Bryce Harper, for instance, right? I think the only one that was offering Bryce Harper $300 million was Philadelphia. That was it at the time, right? They just needed a star.
Or they don't offer him anything and they just let him go to free agency. I guess that would be the last choice, but then you're not getting anything for your player.
You give him a QO.
I'll tell you, I think the most likely thing that happens is the Cubs extend the QO and Willson accepts it. And Willson comes back for 1 more year at $18 million, and then at the end of the year, he hopes to hit his jackpot. And the Cubs,
because they can't offer it again after that.
Correct. And the Cubs in that case, I can't imagine that they would be disappointed to have 1 more year of Willson at $18 million and then be done with it, because their catching situation right now is not settled. We don't know what we've got in Miguel Amaya because he's coming back from injury. The catchers that the Cubs have in their system who look like they are going to have a future impact now look pretty far away. So it wouldn't be
Gomes for 1 more year.
Right. It wouldn't be the worst thing. And PJ Higgins has proven that he can be a useful piece at the corners and behind the plate. So it wouldn't be the worst thing for the Cubs to run back this catching stable 1 more year, especially if they think that they're going to be competitive next year.
Yeah, I think you're right, Pete. That's what I would say the outcome will be for Contreras. It'll be, I would predict they probably find a home for Happ in the offseason.
I agree.
Yep. On the Cardinals front, anybody else that's left over, the thing that they're going to have to address, and just looking up and down, the pitching rotation for next year, it's going to have to be all about pitching in this offseason. I mean, there are no more Juan Sotos available. I don't think after this year, I guess, unless Ohtani's name resurfaces again. But again, I'll go back to say what I think I did last week. That is not a St. Louis target or destiny. Not that they wouldn't love to have him, but I think the reality of being able to retain him isn't. I just don't predict that or see that as being high at all. So I think the Cardinals' focus in the offseason has to be, because of the experience we've had over these last couple of years, has to be all about pitching. Now, I have no idea right now what kind of pitching might be available, but I would think that that's going to be their focus and target in the offseason. Now, the downside of that is their free agent track record over the last 9 or 10 years has really sucked. They've picked up very few that have come through. Initially, top of my head, I'd say Michaelis has probably been the closest, to living up to expectation as a free agent acquisition, which.
But he kind of came out of nowhere.
Right?
He was coming back from Japan.
Right? Yeah, that's right. So the first year, great. He had a couple hiccups with injuries and everything, but he's having a good year this year. But I think it has to be about addressing pitching depth going forward. So I would expect that we'll get a heavy dose of that. I don't think we're talking about any more position players, bats, or anything else. I think if they've held on to these prospects that are mostly offensive centered, right? The guys that were, I guess, bandied about in the Soto deal were all position players. So if you're that high on them, then there's probably no action around position players other than maybe a bench position or a backup catcher. I think it's going to be all about pitching in the offseason for the Cardinals. I think it has to be.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add is for me, I'm surprised, not surprised, disappointed that the Cubs don't have opportunities to call up nearly as many players as we were looking forward to, because Happ and Contreras in particular didn't get moved. So there are going to be a lot of guys who we thought were going to be coming up in the second half of the season that probably aren't, unless we're going to see a bunch of guys getting DFA'd, which very well could happen. Another thing is that, and we thought it was an outside chance that we could see Wade Miley and Drew Smyly get moved out. Maybe this gives the Cubs a little bit more time to work with them, and maybe they get the inside track to get those guys to sign another 1-year deal. If they can't find anything acceptable and they can bridge the gap until the Cubs are really ready to take the next leap forward. But I think the outlook for the Cubs is the same. The Cubs and the Cardinals are going to be in competition this offseason because the Cubs need a front of the line starter, not necessarily an ace, but they need somebody who can slot into the 2 or 3 slot. So I think we're both going to be in the market for Carlos Rodon. If anything, I would say that probably gives the Cardinals a little bit more of an edge because I don't know how willing the Cubs are going to be to give up that high draft pick.
And depending on what he wants, does he want somebody who's got a window open right now or one who's working on a window, right? And sometimes it may not be a factor to some guys, right?
Yep.
But that could play into it as well. So anyway, not a boring deadline. I know some Cardinal fans would probably disagree with me, but not the most boring deadline. A lot of activity, a lot of heartache, a lot of pain, and just watching people like scraping up through the tunnels of hell for somebody to save them, and nobody saved them today. So that was what you were talking about earlier, Elliott. Watching Cardinals Twitter burn was probably entertaining. It was for me.
I think it was for all three of us. I think that's the one thing we can agree on. This year's trade deadline on Cardinals Twitter was outstanding.
Yeah. Entertaining as hell.
It will. The part I'm looking forward to, if the Cardinals take an early, if they're able to make the postseason, have an early exit, one of my annual things I always look forward to doing is muting like at least 100 people until the next season starts. So my off-season Twitter literally is like I might have a bunch of follows. I actually only leave like 40 active because I need that break.
Makes sense.
Got that list ready to mute.
It's easy. You scroll down it. There's not very many, and it's the usual suspects that have their phones literally like super glued to their palm and tweet out every goddamn thought they have every day of the year. And in the off season, I don't want to hear it.
Well, that's because they're all gems, Ron. Every single one of their thoughts are gems.
It's my winter break, and I'm sure some people do that to me too, and that's perfectly fine. Fair enough.
I would advise it.
That's why I would slip back to 104.
That's right. So if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to comment and subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your friends to do the same. We're available on Apple's Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you listen to podcasts, as well as Rumble, Facebook, and YouTube. Be sure to check out the other Gateway City Sports Network podcasts. I mean, I got to think this week that there's just going to be more than the Derek King Sports Show and Talking Sports in the Bleachers with Don Glenn, but who knows? We'll see. You can find Elliott on Twitter at
TOR_Elliott.
And you can find Ron at
TOR_Ron75.
Just know that he might not find you. You may have already been muted. Get in touch with us at the show at teamofrivalspodcast.com or any other social media channel at Team of Rivals Pod.